Hi guys, hope you all been having a wonderful week. My name is Derry and today we are going to dive into week 3 of our Whole Point series. Last week we talked about a freedom from living from others' approval, and on today's message we will listen that we have the freedom to make a choice. We are faced each and every day with choices to make, and your decision will determine the outcome in your life. It's like planting the seeds. When you make a wise choice, your seeds will grow doing great things. And when you make unwise choice, your seeds will grow into not so great things. The hardest thing is knowing which one is the wise one and which one is not. So let's have a listen.
Ooh, snacks! Cookies. Uh-oh. Best if eaten by February 16th, 2009. A long time ago, but I don't care. I'm gonna try it anyway. Hey friends, it's Ashley, and I've got a question for you. Have you ever done something that turned out not to be a great idea, like me eating, 12-year-old cookies? Well, I'm talking about one of those decisions that seemed like a good idea when you thought about it, but after you actually did it, that's when you realized it wasn't that great of an idea. We've all been there, right? I know at least I have. Aside from the cookies, when I was in middle school, I was invited to a birthday party, and I was so excited to go, and my parents were like, yes, you can go to the party, and I'm like, yes, I'm gonna go to this party and have so much fun with my friends. And I asked my mom to drop me off at the party. Now, my mom made it very clear to me that she could only drop me off at the party because she had somewhere else to be. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I just need to get there. I just wasn't worried about anything but getting to this party. Get to the party, and I'm in middle school, so none of my friends had cars. So after the party, everyone else is getting picked up, and I'm left there stranded. And this is way before there was an Uber. Clearly, I didn't fully think through my decision. Now, maybe you might be thinking, that's crazy. How could you have not realized that that was a bad idea? And honestly, you're right. If I had taken the time to think about what I was doing and plan out my day, really think about it, I probably would have realized it wasn't the best choice to make to go to a party without having a ride home. But here's the thing. We all struggle with making wise choices. Every single day, we're faced with all kinds of decisions. And in most cases, we have two options. We can either make the wise choice, the one that we know is best for us, or we can make the unwise choice, the one we probably know isn't the best. Maybe you stayed up all night binging Netflix even though you knew you had a basketball game the next morning. Or maybe you posted a photo online that you hoped your mom wouldn't find. Or maybe you lied to your stepdad about who you were texting or the party that you were going to with your friends. Whatever the choice, chances are you probably decided to do it without really thinking through the consequences first. Even if you knew it wasn't wise, you chose to do it anyway. Why? Because making wise choices just isn't always easy. Think about it. Every single day, you have to decide whether you're gonna honor and respect your parent or talk back to them and break their rules. You have to decide if you're gonna try to do your best on that math assignment or just scribble something down at the last second. You have to decide if you're gonna stick up for that kid getting picked on during gym class or make fun of him or her like everyone else does. Sometimes we make the right choice. We do the thing we know is right or best for us in the moment. But other times, we don't. We do the thing we know may not lead us to the best place. And when that happens, here's what I found to be true. We don't always think about the consequences. Talking back to your parents or breaking their rules will eventually lead to a punishment. And most likely it will cause them to lose trust in you. Breezing through your homework without really understanding it might help you get the assignment done, but it won't help you pass the class at the end of the semester. And making fun of someone else might seem like the popular thing to do at the time, but in the long run, it's extremely hurtful both to you and the person you're making fun of. The reality is, every choice has a consequence. And sooner or later, the consequences of those unwise choices will catch up to you. Now, you might be thinking, sure, that might be true, but why do I need to be worried about all that right now? And listen, I get that. You've got so much going on in your life right now that thinking about what might happen later feels almost impossible or even pointless. But whether you realize it or not, the choices that you make today can have a major impact on your life tomorrow. So what are we supposed to do? If making wise choices isn't always easy, then how can we start? How do we begin to make wise choices in big and small ways, even when it's hard to do? Now, luckily, we aren't the first people who have had this question before. In fact, a guy named Paul wrote about this very thing. Paul wrote about it in a letter to a group of people who lived in Galatia. And we can find that letter today in the Bible in a book called Galatians. Before I tell you what Paul said in his letter, there are a few things that you should know about him. Paul became a Christian a few years after Jesus was crucified and rose from the dead. For Paul, knowing Jesus changed everything. So when he started following Jesus, Paul was all in. He eventually started several churches, including a few in Galatia. Paul really cared about the people in Galatia and wanted to make sure that they weren't missing the whole point of this faith thing. That's why he wrote them the letter that we're going to look at today. So Paul talked to the people specifically about making wise choices. And here's what he said: "You will always harvest what you plant." Okay, let's stop here. Paul wasn't talking about actual planting here, because that would be weird advice, right? He was just using an illustration to teach the Galatians about the choices that they were making. But when it comes to gardening, you can only harvest or produce what you actually plant. For example, if you plant an apple tree, then that's what you're gonna get in your garden. If you plant a lemon tree, then you're gonna eventually expect to harvest lemons. Now, it wouldn't make sense for someone to plant one thing and expect something different to grow from the ground. You have to plant the seeds now that you want to see grow later. Now, while we may not be expert gardeners, we're all planting seeds in our lives every single day with our choices. Every decision that we make today is going to grow or harvest something in our lives later. When we make wise choices, we're planting seeds that have the potential to grow into something great in our lives. But when we make unwise choices, we're planting seeds that have the potential to grow into things that aren't so great. That's why making wise choices now is so important for our lives, not just today, but for tomorrow and beyond. If we want good things to grow in our lives later, we have to start planting the seeds for them by making wise choices now. Why is this so important? Well, look at what Paul said next. "Those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. But those who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit." It sounds kind of harsh, right? But that's how serious Paul was about making sure the Galatians understood the consequences of their choices. When we plant seeds of sin, or things that are selfish right now, basically the things that keep us from being close to God, what will grow in our lives later? Well, according to Paul, nothing good. Eventually, it will harvest consequences that have the potential to destroy parts of our lives, our relationships, and our futures. That's why the next part is so important, because Paul also pointed out that when we do good and make wise choices, now that we'll harvest amazing things in our lives later. When we believe in Jesus and dedicate our lives to following him, we are planting seeds that will one day lead to the greatest gift, spending forever in eternity with Jesus. That's the everlasting life that Paul was talking about. And that's really the whole point. Now, let me just stop here and say that I realize simply knowing this is true doesn't make it easier to make wise choices. It doesn't make it easier to care about our futures more than we care about what's happening right now. And honestly, it doesn't change the fact that we live in a world full of things like death and loss. Because of that, sometimes we can plant all the right things in our lives here on earth and still experience the pain that comes with our circumstances that are beyond our control. In other words, sometimes the harvest is going to be hard to see. That's what makes our belief in Jesus so much more important. Knowing Jesus changes everything for us. And when we believe in him, we know that we'll eventually see the harvest of all of our wise choices one day. See, here's what I want you to know. You have the freedom to make wise choices. You have the freedom to choose what's best for you. You have the freedom to stop and think about a decision before you make it. And all of the rules of freedom we find in the Bible, this is one of the most important. Because like I said, what we do today has an impact on how we live tomorrow. And that means the decisions we make now are so important. So to help us remember this, Paul offered some more encouragement. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. Therefore, whenever we have the opportunity, we should do good to everyone, especially to those in the family of faith. I love this part. Paul was basically saying, keep going. Don't give up, because the good stuff is coming. We may not know exactly how it will show up or even when it will show up, but we can trust that when we're planting the right things, God will eventually reward us with a harvest, either here on earth or in heaven. Maybe you're planting seeds in your life right now by making wise choices, but you feel like you haven't seen anything good come from it yet. You're studying hard. You're saying no to things that aren't good for you. You're choosing a new circle of friends who are better influences for your life. And right now, it just feels difficult. If that's you, don't give up. Just like Paul said, if you keep doing good and making wise choices now, your harvest is coming. And I promise you, even if you can't see it now, it's gonna be so worth it. Remember, you have the freedom to make wise choices. The whole point is to make wise choices now that will lead to the growth of great things in our lives over time. So what does that mean for us today? How can we make wise choices that will lead to good things in the future? Well, first, ask yourself this question. What kind of seeds am I planting in my life right now? Will the decisions that you're making now lead to good things or not so good things? Next, ask yourself about the kind of seeds that you want to be planting instead. Are the choices that you're making now helping you to get closer to what you want for your life in the future? And lastly, ask God for the wisdom and strength and encouragement to make those wise choices. God living inside of us helps us to figure out what's wise or unwise. So ask for God's help. My prayer for you is that you'll remember that you have the freedom to make wise choices, and then that you'll use that freedom to make wise choices now so that you can look back and be proud of the things you've grown in your life as a result. Now, like I said, this isn't always going to be easy, but that's where your group at church comes in. Your group is a great place to talk about the kinds of seeds that you want to plant for your life. It's a space where you can find the encouragement you need to figure out how to make wise choices that will help you in the future, even when it feels difficult. So I hope that you'll keep the conversation going with your group and your group leader. It's the best place to begin. I'm gonna see if I can find some snacks that aren't expired yet. Nope.
Thank you for tuning in, guys. How great it is to know that by knowing Jesus, you can differentiate between wise choices and the not so unwise choices. Remember, when you are faced with uncertainty, always ask God for wisdom, strength, and encouragement to go down the right path. Well, that's it from me, guys. Thank you again for listening and have a great week ahead, everyone.